Greetings, fair listeners, and thank you for joining me once again as we celebrate stories and storytelling in all their forms and the bards and artists who bring them all to life. I am the Tale Collector and your host, Erica Adams. I'm sorry to say that I lost my dad's VHS copy of this movie as a kid. He has told me that he couldn't care less about it now, and of course I believe him. Still, I do feel a sliver of guilt about it every now and again. So, yeah. Sorry, Dad. In another example of 5-year-old mistaking on my part, by the time I saw this movie, I had already been on a long and steady diet of Disney fare, resulting in the misguided belief that anything animated was exclusively for kids and therefore fun, while anything not animated was exclusively for grown-ups and therefore not fun. While certainly not family unfriendly by any stretch, this was one of the first films I saw that began to subtly chip away at that belief, for which I am now eternally grateful. And, as an added bonus, I don't think I could have had a better introduction than this to the immortal musical movement that was the Beatles. Let's all take a ride on Yellow Submarine. First released July 17th, 1968, and rated G, ages 7 and up. "80,000 leagues beneath the sea lays, or lies, the narrator's not too sure, the beautiful utopia known as Pepperland. In this paradise of light and color, and under the protection of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the gentle, peace-loving inhabitants spend their days creating music with which to entertain and bring joy to one another. But the hairy, long-nosed blue meanies decide they are fed up with such cheerful sounds and attack with all their music-hating might, reducing Pepperland to a gray and silent wasteland. At the behest of the elderly Lord Mayor, the only slightly less elderly sailor, Old Fred, takes the titular Yellow Submarine and travels up to the surface to seek help. He ultimately finds himself in 1960s England, where he comes across a bored and depressed Ringo Starr wandering the streets of Liverpool. Touched by Old Fred's story, Ringo takes him to meet his bandmates, the charismatic John Lennon, the spiritual George Harrison, and the nonchalant Paul McCartney. And so the Fab Four agree to accompany Old Fred in the magical sub through bizarre and dangerous waters. Armed with nothing but the powers of music, peace, and love, the Beatles must face off against the spitefully insane Chief Blue Meanie and his oddball minions in order to save Pepperland and restore its people to their former happy and harmonious selves. The film is based on the song of the same name, written by McCartney and Lennon, and first released on the Beatles' 1966 album, Revolver. It was originally intended as a nonsense song for children, but over time has been increasingly believed by adults to carry social and political symbolism. I personally see it as a song best enjoyed with a bunch of friends of any age who couldn't care less how long it goes on or whether they or anyone else can carry a tune to begin with. And no, you don't have to be either drunk or high to get the full, delightfully silly effect. And speaking of trippy states of mind, this is the movie that set the standard for me when it comes to animation that's a combination of explosively colorful and weird to the point where you start to wonder if the creators weren't on something themselves. Anime like Mononoke and Catnapped, and obscure pre-90s movies like Fantastic Planet and Twice Upon a Time spring to mind. Though primarily 2D animated, Yellow Submarine cranks the eye candy level up to 11 by utilizing a variety of animations and art styles. Among others, there's rotoscoping, Andy Warhol-esque pop art, and cutout imagery reminiscent of Monty Python's Flying Circus. Moreover, though made when the Beatles were at the height of their popularity, Yellow Submarine still looks and feels like a high-quality animated musical with real artistic effort put into it, rather than just an hour and a half worth of Beatles songs strung together by a series of random acting scenes. Magical Mystery Tour, I'm looking at you. Not only are the song segments fun music videos in their own right, but the classic Beatles tunes peppering the film, pun intended, blend seamlessly with the narrative and help to move it along. Eleanor Rigby is played as the Yellow Submarine flies over Liverpool, with all the lonely people going through the motions of their seemingly unfulfilling day-to-day lives. In the much more upbeat All Together Now, our heroes have just entered the sub and are now learning, or rather playing with, the controls, and having a grand old time doing it. And the crew perform When I'm 64 while traveling through the Sea of Time, after first shrinking down into children and then literally being buried in piles of their own whitening hair as they age into old men. There are also strong elements of Alice in Wonderland, but not just for the obvious reasons like the weird landscapes and the crazy creatures. The protagonists act not like they're on a rescue mission, but rather a self-guided tour. They encounter some curiosity, have an experience with it, and then move on to the next one. As a matter of fact, the Beatles don't react half as strongly to their adventures as Alice does to hers, and what they see is way freakier than anything Carol ever came up with. But this actually makes them even funnier to watch because of how utterly dorky they are. Whether they're stumbling from one fever dream situation to another and surviving through nothing but sheer dumb luck, or bantering in their thick British accents about some pseudo-philosophical gibberish like lazy college buddies, sometimes they just make you want to shake your head in a mixture of aggrieved pity and barely suppressed exasperation, even when their lovably goofy charm makes you want to laugh. Not to mention their puns so embarrassingly lame they make Looney Tunes humor look sophisticated. The original characters are even less complex in terms of motivation and personality, but in such a bonkers world they really couldn't be any other way, nor should they. The Chief Blue Meanie is like Gonzo the Muppet with the body of a life-size Chia Pet and the quote-unquote manners of the Queen of Hearts. Calm and collected and agreeable one moment, screaming like a psychopathic toddler at the slightest provocation the next. Old Fred is a brave and true sailorman, but also kind of a melodramatic twit. Granted, his people and homeland are in danger, but his childish pleading and one-track mind seldom encourage the rest of the cast to take him very seriously. But my favorite is one Jeremy Hillary Boob, Ph.D., with a rabbit-like body, pink monkey ears and a fluffy tail, the face of a clown, and a habit for perpetually speaking in rhyme. Jeremy has an insatiable passion for knowledge and scholarly endeavors. The epitome of the absent-minded professor, he often forgets his own facts, contradicts himself, and fixes broken objects a bit too well. But he's just so adorable in his enthusiasm as well as his appearance that you can never stay mad at him for long. Having said all that, if there is anyone here who does display any real character development, it's Ringo. He's easily the kindest and most sensitive of the quartet, even to the point of making the other three look like jerks. While John, George, and Paul tend to tease him and show a sort of just-along-for-the-ride kind of attitude throughout, Ringo actually stops and thinks about his place in the world, or lack thereof, and cares about the feelings and well-being of others, even a so-called nowhere man. In hindsight, if not for Ringo, there wouldn't even be a story, never mind the deliverance of his civilization. Of course, I might be overanalyzing a tiny detail in a movie better known for random madness than logic or drama, but I feel that Ringo in particular is the one Beatle who seems to get anything personal out of the entire adventure, and to their credit, the other three do learn to better appreciate this, and him, by the end. Being only a casual Beatles listener myself, I can't say for certain exactly how much the Beatles of Yellow Submarine resemble their real-life counterparts. Plus, there are a few jokes and references here and there that only hardcore fans and historians are going to understand. Even so, I do know from personal experience that you don't have to know anything about the Beatles to have a complete ball with this movie. With its colorful visuals, creative absurdity, and offbeat humor, the idea of Yellow Submarine is not to be challenged by a complex story, but to have a fun and groovy experience while rocking out to some of the Beatles' greatest hits. It may very well be a product of its time, but its joyful aesthetic, just like its message, "All you need is love," will remain ever universal. Gather around next time for another tale you may have forgotten or have never heard before. Until then, listeners, may inspiration always find you.